After many years, Xiao Yan saw Medusa once again and timely rescued his daughter, Xiao, from the clutches of a strong figure from the Soul Hall. Picking up from the last chapter, Xiao Yan led a team of Dozun warriors, passing through a spatial wormhole to the Jiama Empire. On the endless way by plane, the void suddenly rippled violently, and a massive spatial black hole slowly emerged. Then, a group of people stepped out from the void and finally landed on the plane. This is the Northwest continent. An elder with a ruddy complexion looked around after landing, then turned to a young man in black among the crowd, who was Xiao Yan and his group rushing from the falling star pavilion to the Northwest continent, and said, "Young master, we should be on the north side of the Northwest continent. According to our intelligence, the north has become the territory of the Lion Abyss sect, which means we have been transported into the sphere of influence of the Lion Abyss sect. But it's nothing. There are not many strong figures of the Lion Abyss sect in the north. Their main force should be concentrated at the border with the Yin Alliance. As long as we move northwest, we can reach the territory of the Yin Alliance after passing through some checkpoints." Hearing this, Xiao Yan nodded and said, "In that case, let's set off." Then with a wave of his hand, his figure turned into a flash of light and swept out, with the sound of breaking wind following closely behind, and one after another, figures followed closely behind him. Xiao Yan and his group were heading towards the Yin Alliance in the northwest direction. This area has been controlled by the Lion Abyss sect, so they encountered some station troops and strong figures along the way. However, these so-called strong figures were at most at the level of ordinary Dozong, and in the eyes of Xiao Yan and his group, there was no threat, so they passed smoothly without encountering any resistance. On the contrary, they also learned about the situation of the Northwest continent from some captured strong figures of the Lion Abyss sect, and the information obtained made Xiao Yan's heart slightly sink. The current situation is developing much faster than he expected, and the territory of the Yin Alliance has been reduced by nearly 1/3, and most of the strong figures of the Yin Alliance have gathered at the Xianhuang Fortress in the Xianhuang Sky Ravine, which is the most important stronghold besides the Jiama Empire's headquarters. If the fortress is captured, the defense line of thousands of miles will collapse completely, which will undoubtedly make the hard work of the Yin Alliance over the years go to waste. Therefore, the strong figures of the Yin Alliance are now all concentrated in the Xianhuang Fortress, and with the support of the Soul Hall, the Lion Abyss sect almost has the terrifying strength to sweep through most of the forces on the northwest continent. The Xianhuang Fortress is the key point of contention between the two sides, and the Lion Abyss sect will not give up easily. After obtaining this not-so-good information, Xiao Yan had to speed up the pace of the journey. He must arrive there when the Lion Abyss sect begins to occupy the Xianhuang Fortress, otherwise the Yin Alliance will suffer huge losses. Suddenly, a breaking wind sound came from the boundless blue sky, and dozens of black shadows quickly approached, and in the blink of an eye, they stepped on the void and appeared on a green peak. The territory of the Yin Alliance is in front, and according to their speed, they should be able to reach the Xianhuang Sky Ravine at dusk. An old man in white looked around and respectfully said to Xiao Yan beside him, "According to the latest intelligence, the Lion Abyss sect and the Soul Hall, as well as other strong figures who were coerced and lured, the number of Dozun level has reached more than 30 people. While the Yin Alliance only has 10, the disparity between the two is completely disproportionate. They actually have more than 30 Dozun?" Xiao Yan's face showed a thoughtful expression, hesitated for a while, and suddenly asked, "How many strong figures of the Lion Abyss sect are above the level of 6-star Dozun? Among them, for have reached the level of 8-star Dozun. As for whether there are stronger figures in the Soul Hall, we don't know," the old man in white said thoughtfully. Hearing this, Xiao Yan nodded slightly. "Let's go. Speed up, and try to reach the Xianhuang Sky Ravine at dusk." Xiao Yan took a light breath, and then waved his hand and rushed forward. At this moment, the thick, dark clouds shrouded the sky above the Xianhuang Sky Ravine, followed by countless figures, and the deafening sound of killing came from that army. On the fortress hundreds of feet high, the warriors of the Yin Alliance looked solemnly at the distant sea of people. Over the years, although the Yin Alliance has encountered many enemies in its expansion, it has never been so oppressed that it has no ability to fight back. Everyone took a long breath, and then their gaze slowly shifted, and finally stopped at the center of the city wall, where a slim figure stood proudly. Is the attack about to start? Kai Lin stared at the distant, dissipating black fog, and her cheeks showed a cold, killing intent. Xiao Ding sat in a wheelchair, looked into the distance, and said softly, "If we can't hold on, you take Xiao Xiao and leave." Beside him, Xiao Li's face also showed a solemn expression and said in a deep voice, "Yes, this is the child of the third brother. There must be no mistake." Hearing the two people's words, Kai Lin nodded slightly, then looked to the side, where there was a little girl in white, who looked about 4 or 5 years old, and there was a small 7-color snake pattern on her forehead, and her big black eyes showed an indescribable aura. Kai Lin looked at the little girl. Her eyes showed a trace of doting, and then squatted down and gently held her in her arms. And the little girl seemed to feel the wrong atmosphere, so she didn't cry. And her little hand tightly held Kai Lin's long neck, and said in a crisp voice, "Mom, don't be afraid, Uncle said Dad will come back." Hearing this, the corners of Kai Lin's lips slightly rose. A moment later, she raised her head and looked at the little fairy doctor next to her, and said softly, "Will he really come back?" Xiao Yan has been in the heavenly tomb for half a year. According to the time calculation, he should have come out from the ancient world. If he arrives at the Falling Star Pavilion, the old man must tell him the situation here, and with his character, he will come as fast as possible. The little fairy doctor nodded and said. Kai Lin patted the little girl in her arms, staring at the little fairy doctor, and said, "If the fortress is broken, you take Xiao Xiao and leave. If something happens to her, no matter what Xiao Yan does, I will never forgive him." Hearing this, the little fairy doctor was slightly stunned, looking at Kai Lin's tightly pursed red lips, and finally she could only nod silently. Xiao Ding saw this scene and sighed lightly. "Over the years, you have done too much for the Yan alliance and the Xiao family. If this time can pass smoothly, I will definitely let Xiao Yan officially marry you into the Xiao family." Big brother is right, Xiao Li also nodded. Like Xiao Ding, he also values Xiao Yan very much. But this time they have to take on this younger sister-in-law. Let's solve the trouble in front of us first. Kai Lin put down the little Xiao Xiao in her arms, and a young man in black appeared in her mind. She bit her red lips lightly, and her eyes showed a complicated look. As the queen of the Snakeman clan, if she doesn't get married, it's okay. But if she really falls in love with a person, then she will be truly loyal to him. This is the inheritance between the blood of the Medusa queen of the Snakeman clan. When Kai Lin stood up again, the deafening drum sound suddenly came from the black fog in the distance, and then figures flew out of the black fog and hovered in the sky. At this time, a burly middle-aged man with a golden big knife on his shoulder, staring tightly at the enchanting figure on the city wall. His big laugh contained a domineering presence that echoed in the world. The middle-aged man with golden hair stood proudly in the sky and said with a smile, "Ha ha, Medusa, have you thought about it? Do you surrender to the Lion Abyss sect, or let the Lion Abyss sect slaughter your Yan alliance? You should know that the Yan alliance is just resisting desperately. Your strength is far from comparable to ours. As long as the Yan alliance agrees to submit to the Lion Abyss sect and hand over all the people of the Xiao family, I promise you in the name of the head of the Lion Abyss sect, I will not hurt anyone in the Yan alliance." In response to his words, Kai Lin just glanced at him contemptuously, and then said coldly, "Don't even think about it." Hearing Kai Lin's order, a low response immediately sounded around. Then, outside the fortress, a huge energy shield slowly emerged, and finally stretched across the two camps, covering the entire fortress. "Archers, get ready," Kai Lin said coldly again. The sound of the crossbow immediately sounded, and a huge crossbow was pulled open by several people working together. The golden-haired man frowned, not expecting any answer he wanted, but instead attracted these crossbow carts. "Sure, Tian, don't talk nonsense anymore. If it's because of your reason that the people of the Xiao family escape, you can't bear the responsibility." When the golden-haired man frowned, a cold voice suddenly came from behind. Hearing this voice, the middle-aged man named Sher Tian's face also changed slightly, and he turned his head to look back. An old man in black stood in the void, with a soul body swirling around. This person's face revealed a familiar breath, and upon closer inspection, it turned out to be the 9 heavenly Dozun, who once led the strong figures of the Soul Hall to attack the Falling Star Pavilion. Tian smiled and no longer said any nonsense. He looked up at the thick defense cover on the fortress, and after a while, he raised his palm and shouted loudly, "Everyone, attack!" With Tian's shout, the outside of the fortress burst into a deafening roar of killing, and the whole earth trembled instantly. And the huge crossbow arrows on the fortress shot out like a dark cloud, densely shooting towards the army of the Lion Abyss sect. "Start! Break the energy shield." Tian slowly made a peculiar gesture. The reason why the Lion Abyss sect can sweep through nearly half of the northwest continent is not by relying on the strong figures of Do Wang and Do Huang, but Do Zong or even Do Zun. Just as Tian made this gesture, the black fog behind him slowly tore open, and nearly 100 figures stepped out slowly. There were nearly 20 or 30 people in front of these figures, with a vast and terrifying breath. Their appearance made the whole world tremble a little. When Kai Lin and others saw them on the city wall, they also became a bit frightened. These people are the real people who decide the victory or defeat of the battlefield. 100 figures stepped forward in the void, and when they were only a few hundred feet away from the fortress, they stopped and shouted coldly. A huge stream of fighting energy gushed out from their bodies and finally gathered in the sky, condensing into a huge energy beast with a length of 1,000 feet. After the beast took shape, it stepped on the void and rushed fiercely towards the energy shield covering the fortress. The energy shield in the sky suddenly broke open in the eyes of the people who were stunned. Just as the energy shield broke, Kai Lin clenched her jade hand, and her cold voice sounded on the city wall. "Although the northwest continent is vast and boundless, we have no way back, because behind us is our empire and territory. If you still have blood, pick up your weapons and fight to the end." The cold voice instantly made the eyes of the Yan Alliance warriors turn red, and a surge of excitement welled up from the bottom of their hearts, finally turning into a low roar in the sky. As soon as Kai Lin's voice fell, she fought fiercely with the strong army of the Lion Abyss sect without hesitation. The sound of the battle immediately echoed in the world. "Little fairy doctor, take good care of Xiao." Kai Lin looked at the fierce battle and turned to the little fairy doctor beside her and said softly, then turned and rushed into the sky. Just as Kai Lin and Tian fought fiercely in the sky, the battlefield within 100 feet outside the fortress had also fallen into extreme chaos. Outside the chaotic battlefield, the 9 heavens Do Zun hovered in the sky, coldly watching the continuously fighting battlefield, with a sneer on the corner of his mouth. All the souls of the warriors who died in this area were sucked into the ground by a strange force the moment they fell to the ground. "Fight! The more you die, the better." The 9 heavens Do Zun chuckled softly. On the city wall, the little fairy doctor held Xiao and looked up and around, her mood slightly heavy. Although the Yin Alliance occupied the terrain, the number and quality of the strong figures were far inferior to the Lion Abyss sect. "Little fairy doctor sister, you take Xiao and leave first. It won't last long here." Suddenly, a light drink sounded, and the little fairy doctor slightly tilted her head to see that it was Qing Lin. At this moment, she had summoned all the strong figures she controlled. Qing Lin's voice just fell, and a few ghost-like figures suddenly appeared in front, saying, "How can it be so easy?" A few Do Zun below 3 stars also dare to talk big here. Qing Lin sneered and rushed out directly. As Qing Lin blocked those Do Zun strong figures, Tian Hua Zun also appeared beside the little fairy doctor and said in a deep voice, "Little fairy doctor, go quickly. Start." Then he stepped on the ground and rushed out first, and the several Do Zun strong figures behind him also followed closely. This little girl's soul power is really strong. I have seen it for the first time in so many years. An old man with a gloomy face let out a strange smile. Seeing this scene, the little fairy doctor's eyes dimmed slightly. She held Xiao and began to retreat urgently, but as soon as she took a few steps back, a thick black fog quickly came, and an old man with a gloomy face rushed out from it, and the chain in his hand shot fiercely towards Xiao in the little fairy doctor's arms. Suddenly, another dark shadow rushed at her with a fierce wind, and the two trapped the little fairy doctor in front and behind. "Shaoli, catch it!" Faced with the siege of 2 6-star Do Zun strong figures, The little fairy doctor's face changed slightly, glanced at Xiao Li not far away, and waved her jade hand fiercely, and the soft wind sent Xiao Xiao to his side. Not far away, when Xiao Li saw Xiao Xiao being thrown out, he quickly displayed his body technique and appeared behind her. However, just as he was about to reach out to catch it, a ghost-like figure swept over first, and the sharp palm wind slapped Xiao Li's chest like lightning, and the powerful force knocked him out. The person who was attacked by surprise saw that he actually wanted to catch Xiao Xiao, and Xiao Li's eyes immediately turned blood red. Kailin, who was fighting fiercely with Xiao in the distance, also saw this scene, and her face turned pale instantly. Medusa, surrender quickly. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. In the shocked eyes of the crowd, the thin old man grabbed Xiao Zhao's clothes and then looked at Kailin with a sinister smile. However, just as he said the last word, a chill rose from the bottom of his heart. Suddenly, a cold palm appeared on his throat, holding it like a ghost without any warning. At the moment of death, the old man finally saw from the corner of his eyes that a young man in black with an indifferent face was standing behind him. The black-clothed young man who suddenly appeared discarded the old man's body, then reached out and held the little girl who was staring at him tightly. He smiled softly on his face and looked up at Kailin and others who were stiff in the distance and smiled slightly. The soft voice slowly entered Kailin's ears. "Honey, I'm a little late to come back." Looking at the young man in black who appeared on the city wall, many people were stunned for a moment, and then suddenly a burst of ecstasy emerged, and various titles resounded. For these ecstatic exclamations, Xiao Yan smiled slightly. Just about to speak, his eyebrows twitched slightly, and a figure appeared like a ghost behind him. The sudden attack surprised many people, and they shouted in a hurry, "Be careful!" As soon as the shout fell, a low muffled sound suddenly rang out. Then everyone was shocked to see that the strong figure of the Lion Abyss sect, who was at least at the level of Dozun, was actually flying out without any warning, his eyes full of horror. He didn't even see how Xiao Yan made a move. When Xiao Yan easily repelled a Dozun strong figure, he didn't even turn around, looked up at the suppressed situation of the Yin Alliance on the city wall, and waved his hand lightly and said, "Start." With Xiao Yan's wave, the sky suddenly burst into an astonishing energy fluctuation, and then dozens of breaking wind sounds rang out. Then everyone saw that dozens of figures stepped on the void, like meteors, and appeared on the city wall in a few flashes. When these dozens of figures appeared on the city wall, both the strong figures of the Yin Alliance and the Lion Abyss sect gasped, because they found that this large group of people were all Dozun strong figures. What a terrifying lineup! Xiao Ding, Haibo Dong and others looked at the figures suspended in the air in shock. At least more than 30 people. That is to say, this is a group of more than 30 Dozun-level strong figures. Such a terrifying lineup is enough to sweep any force on the northwest continent. This guy has not been seen for a few years, and I don't know what kind of state he has reached. Everyone's eyes were all focused on the young man in black holding Xiao Xiao, and a sense of admiration welled up in their hearts. Then a joy of survival after the disaster quietly rose. Haha, everyone start. Let's try how strong these so-called strong people on the northwest continent are. Whose eldest brother laughed to the sky, and then directly stepped on the void and rushed towards the strong figures of the Lion Abyss sect not far away. And the rest of the strong figures and the guests and elders of the Falling Star Pavilion also rushed out with a big laugh. And the fighting spirit was so strong that the whole fortress was shaking. For the sudden change of the situation, Xiao Yan just smiled, then withdrew his gaze and looked at the little girl staring at himself in his arms, and asked softly, "What's your name?" The little girl stared at Xiao Yan, although his appearance made her feel unfamiliar, but the familiarity in the blood made her have no guard against Xiao Yan, so she answered timidly, "Xiao Xiao." Looking at the lovely Xiao Xiao, a different emotion welled up in Xiao Yan's heart, and he smiled and pinched her little nose and asked, "Do you know who I am?" Xiao Xiao looked at Xiao Yan seriously, and after a while, she answered in a low voice, "Are you Dad?" When these two words entered Xiao Yan's ears, his heart suddenly trembled fiercely, and a wave of emotion surged in his heart. "Kid, you finally came back." As Xiao Yan held Xiao Xiao tightly, a joyful shout suddenly came. Xiao Yan turned his head and saw a man pushing a wheelchair walking quickly, and his heart was filled with excitement and said with a smile, "Big brother, second brother, long time no see, you guy." Xiao Li's originally gloomy face was full of joy, and he rushed over and hugged Xiao Yan warmly. Xiao Ding looked at Xiao Yan in front of him. Even though he was always calm, he couldn't help but laugh excitedly. "Is it okay?" Xiao Yan nodded slightly. "A few years have passed. Everyone has changed, but the only thing that hasn't changed is the brotherhood between them. It's good that you're back. It's not too late," Xiao Ding said with a smile. "Haha, the leader. You are really competent as a hands-off owner." As Xiao Yan nodded, several figures flashed, and the familiar laughter made him slightly stunned. Looking up, he saw Bing Huang Haibo Dong, Fa Ma, and the Danwang Gu He of the Jiama Empire in those years. As Xiao Yan saluted these old friends, a red figure flashed and took Xiao Xiao from Xiao Yan's arms, and then kept looking at her, afraid that she would have any accidents. Xiao Yan looked at the woman in front of him wearing red armor, and a soft color appeared in his eyes, and he said softly, "Kai Lin." Hearing Xiao Yan's voice, Kai Lin was slightly stunned, looked up, looked at the young man in black in front of her with a complicated look in her eyes, and then rubbed Xiao Zhao's hair and said, "I thought you wouldn't come back." Kai Lin's words have some anger, but also contain grievances. Over the years, as a woman, she not only has to take care of the children, but also pay attention to the development of the Yan Alliance. She doesn't know how much effort she has made for these things, and these burdens are given by the man in front of her. Third brother, Kai Lin has not been easy over the years. Don't bully her, otherwise, I and the eldest brother will be the first to disagree. Seeing Kai Lin's expression, Xiao Li patted Xiao Yan's shoulder and said in a deep voice, "Yes, we should thank Kai Lin over the years." Haibo Dong and others also nodded in agreement. Xiao Yan looked at Kai Lin's tightly pursed red lips, and a sense of apology welled up in his heart. He took 2 steps forward and reached out to embrace her, and said softly, "I'm sorry, you have worked hard." Hearing the low voice coming from the ear, even the strong Kai Lin also felt a little sour in her nose. No matter how strong she is in the eyes of others, she is, after all, just a woman. Don't think this can let you go. Let me handle the next thing. Xiao Yan smiled slightly, then gently pinched Xiao Zhao's face and said, "Good girl, follow your mother." Xiao Xiao nodded. "Be careful, there are many Dozun strong figures on the other side," Kai Lin said with some worry. Xiao Yan smiled and walked out of the city wall slowly in the void. He glanced at the golden-haired big man not far away, who was gloomy. "Are you the leader of the Yan Alliance, Xiao Yan?" Shi Tian stared at Xiao Yan and said, "For this cold drink." Xiao Yan seemed not to hear it. Seeing this, Shi Tian was furious, and the golden big knife in his hand was fiercely chopped down. He is the head of the Lion Abyss sect, a strong figure of the 6-star Dozun. Kai Lin and others on the city wall saw Xiao Yan actually ignoring Shi Tian and hurriedly reminded. And the reminders of the crowd just fell, and the golden sword light was fiercely hit on Xiao Yan. That powerful attack did not even shake Xiao Yan's body back half a step. How could it be possible? Shi Tian and Kai Lin and others saw this scene, and their faces were all shocked. Shi Tian's offensive attack, even the 7-star Dozun dare not take it without defense. I saw Xiao Yan gently flicked his sleeve, and then waved his palm towards Shi Tian from a distance. A terrible hot wind directly penetrated the space, quickly condensed into a huge flame hand. The fighting energy defense around Shi Tian's body was almost instantly destroyed like thin paper, and the terrible hot wind turned his body into a fireball, flying out fiercely. When I saw that the head of the Lion Abyss sect, Shi Tian, could not even take a palm from Xiao Yan, the strong figures of the Yan Alliance and the Lion Abyss sect were all shocked. "Nineth Heavenly Dozun, come out." Xiao Yan solved Shi Tian with a palm, then raised his head and looked into the distant black fog. His light voice echoed like thunder in the sky.